Wow, so in 1 month we got 2 animated family films about robots. One is a new entry in one of the hugest franchises in film, and one is a complete newcomer to film. So, how do they compare? Let's activate discussion mode and talk about it. That was stupid. I've said it before, but I'm only a very casual Transformers fan. Never seen any of the cartoons, only a few of the movies, and I only even like a few of the ones I've seen. That being said though, Transformers 1 actually got me kinda interested in learning more about this franchise. You see, it's the first of 2 films this year that are about 2 classic enemies that we, the audience, know as enemies, who actually, as it turns out, used to be best buds. The other 2 we're going to see later in the year are Mufasa and Simba, but for now we're talking about Optimus Prime and Megatron. And in addition to their origin story, it's also kind of about how this Transformers world came to be what it is today. How the Autobots and the Decepticons kind of formed and then came at each other, I guess. And I won't lie, them tackling that story actually got me kind of intrigued about the lore of this world. And the characters were interesting and likable enough for me to want to know more about specifically them. There were cool artifacts and stuff that I wanted to know more about their history and what they actually do. The thing is, I can't tell if this actually ties into any of the other media or if it's its own self-contained thing. But from my understanding, I don't think the writers know either. The thing is, as cool as the artifacts and the lore and the characters are, the story itself is pretty standard kids movie stuff. The only time I ever really felt this movie kind of step up a little bit was with the, not Megatron, but D16 character. I think that's what they called him. I think that was his name. The character played by Brian Michael Bendis. He and the other characters find out some secrets about their society that have been kept from them for a long time, and the way his character reacts so differently from the other ones really impressed me. Because the writers give him some dialogue that really lets you look into his mind and how he's reacting, and it goes to some dark places. And it made the movie feel a little bit more mature in those spots. They could have easily made it too over the top and out of place, but I think what perfected it was Brian Michael Bendis' performance. He is just a standout actor in this. The other actors were fine. They're all just kind of doing their typical thing that they do. Keegan-Michael Key is funny. He's just kind of doing his Keegan-Michael Key thing.
I'm actually working on some nicknames. The one I'm floating right now is Badassatron, which is actually pronounced Badassatron.
Scarlett Johansson does her cool action girl thing. But I think I was the most disappointed with Chris Hemsworth. Because, I mean, yeah, he is just kind of doing the same thing that the others are doing, just his typical shtick. But that's kind of a letdown for me because that just isn't what I expected a young Optimus Prime to be. I know he's bound to be pretty different from the way Peter Cullen plays him, because he's so much younger. But I don't know, I think of the way Ewan McGregor played Obi-Wan Kenobi, and how different it was from Alec Guinness's take, but at the same time, it felt like a younger version of that same guy. I honestly think Chris Hemsworth could have done that same thing and felt like a younger Peter Cullen Optimus Prime, but the way they wrote him, they just didn't really allow him to. But it was still a good, energized performance that I'm sure the kids will love. Just like I'm sure they'll love all the bright, colorful animation. Which was pretty good in my opinion. Everything in this movie is so metallic, obviously. And sometimes at first glance it can look kinda cheap, but I was honestly really impressed with how sleek and shiny everything looked. I also really want to shout out the sound design people, because every movement, and I mean every little movement in this, comes with some clinking and clanking, and it's so satisfying. Probably a bit of a weird observation, but I like technicals. Unfortunately though, technicals aren't enough to really save this. So I say overall, Transformers 1, more like Transformers mid. It's just kind of your average Saturday morning cartoon, but it's got some shining moments and characters here and there. Now on the other hand, I don't think it'll surprise anyone to find out that I think The Wild Robot is a much better animated robot movie. I have been excited for this movie since day one, and I mean the day they announced it. All I saw was a drawing of a robot in the wilderness. And one very specific type of image that I love is the image of a robot covered in greenery. Very specific, I know. And that is the main character of this. So it already felt like it was being made specifically for me, but then I saw the director, Chris Sanders. I love his work. Lilo and Stitch was one of my favorite movies growing up, and How to Train Your Dragon is one of my brother's favorite movies. Also, when I worked at Disney World, I used to work with Chris Sanders' good friend, Gear Ness. Look him up. He's a cool dude. Anyway, The Wild Robot is just a beautiful looking movie. It is doing that 3D as 2D thing that everybody loves so well, with this wonderfully gorgeous painterly aesthetic. And it's not just the textures and the rendering that looks great, the movement is great, especially on the robot itself. The way its body and its parts like flip around and shuffle around to change its shape so that it can move in all these unique ways, it can climb differently, it can run differently. It's so fun to watch this thing just go through nature in different ways. And this movie loves its nature. Every part of nature that it shows is just shown so beautifully and with a lot of love for it. And what I like about it is that they don't just show the beautiful side of nature, they also show the dark and savage side of nature too. Yeah, this movie can get kind of intense sometimes, because it will show just how vicious animals can be with each other. And it explains itself that the reason it's showing that is because they have to be. They really stress the kind of violence that it takes to survive out in the wild. But what's even cooler about it is that they use that to get a message across about how it doesn't just take toughness to survive, and how sometimes it's actually essential to just drop the toughness, and you can only survive with kindness and community. It's done in a really touching way. And that's not the only emotional theme that they tug on your heartstrings with. There's a lot of important messages in this movie. They talk about stuff like the randomness of good and bad things that happen to you, and appreciating where life has brought you, regardless of how it brought you there. There's themes about what we were made to be versus what we choose to be, kind of like another cartoon robot we know. And probably the most emotional thing you'll experience in this movie is its story about motherhood. When these scenes play out and the music swells up, it is just some of the most emotional stuff that's been in a movie this year. I'm sure it sounds like there's a lot going on in this, and there is, but it all works together so beautifully. So, I gotta say, The Wild Robot, more like the Gas Robot, simply a phenomenal artistic experience. So, back to the question at the start of the video. Which robot animated kids movie of September 2024 is better? The Wild Robot, obviously.